They're definitely something that has become a large part of my life. There's something to me very special about a salmon run and a salmon watershed, which is largely as it was hundreds and thousands of years ago. This is a very special part of the world. And these salmon, to me, they exemplify, they're a vital part of that very special part of the world.
Has it ever dawned on you? I just wanna spawn with you. I will swim right up your creek. I don't need no fancy tricks. Just find a bed of pebble stone. You and me there all alone. Has it ever dawned on you? I just wanna spawn with you.
Well, we're here at Emmonak at the Yukon Delta near the mouth of the Yukon River, and at least in this part of the country, in the Central Yupik language, the word for fish in general is the same word for food. And depending on the area and the species of fish that sustains most people out here, it's certainly salmon. So if you ask someone, have you eaten food, you will be asking them, have you eaten fish? And here, it's specifically, have you eaten salmon? Because that's sort of the mainstay of the economy and culture. 5 of the previous 7 years, there were biological or economic disasters declared because of the low salmon returns. It focuses the concern and fears for the resource, made everyone realize that if we don't do something now for this resource, we may not have a resource to worry about or fight about or negotiate about in the future.
The Yukon River empties the 5th largest drainage in North America into the Bering Sea and has some of the longest salmon migrations in the world. Survival of salmon stocks means cooperation between Canada and the U.S., Yukon and Alaska, and all the fisheries along the river. Now part of the Pacific Salmon Treaty, the Yukon River Salmon Agreement represents years of negotiation, a major achievement for the people who manage and depend upon the salmon. This international agreement is the basis of a management process to ensure the future of the fisheries and Yukon River salmon. The agreement assigns the Yukon River Panel to make recommendations to management entities in Alaska and Yukon concerning the conservation and management of Canadian origin salmon.
One point I want to make is that next year that we make Porcupine River and the fishing branch a priority in our budgeting for the year 2004-2005 ARNI projects, and I want to make that clear here. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Gary? I'd like to support Carl in that. The treaty allows for the development of an official rebuilding plan for the porcupine, and I'd like to have the Joint Technical Committee tasked with options other than.
The panel is comprised of fishers and agency representatives, 12 appointed individuals, 6 from each country. Through the Yukon River Panel, fishers can participate in management decisions that affect their fisheries.
So you have to just really take good care of that fish. And I don't want to fight against you guys. I like you guys to have fish too, and us too, we need to fish. You know what I mean?
We want responsible management of the salmon resource, which includes both sides of the border. The panel is unique, and it involves people from all walks of life in decision making. I think that's where everyone in the north wants to see us come from. They want to be part of the process, and they know at the end of the day, if they don't put the fish there, that they're probably going to be one of the first ones that will suffer.
The R&E Fund receives $1.2 million US annually to support research and management activities, programs and projects aimed at the restoration, conservation, and enhancement of Canadian origin Yukon River salmon.
The panel sees the fund as a major resource to not only help restore stocks of Canadian origin, but also to be used as a tool to involve people more effectively in gathering the information necessary for management and the restoration of these stocks, and as well building the communication links between the communities along the river.
In this video, we take a brief look at parts of the Yukon River the salmon and the fisheries, the families and communities that live along its length.
Same idea of the exchange is trying to build people-to-people relationships and getting people to know each other on both sides of the border, learn about the fishery in different communities, see how people are similar, but also see how the fishery is different in different parts of the river. And we went to 3 villages on the Alaskan side, Emmonak, Galena, and Tanana, and then we did the full spectrum in Canada. We boated from Eagle to Dawson, and then did a partial road and more boat trips all the way up to Whitehorse.
There are 5 salmon species found in the Yukon River drainage, with Chinook, chum, and coho as the primary concern addressed under the agreement. To ensure enough salmon get to the spawning grounds, both countries agree that meeting spawning escapement objectives and conservation needs are the first priority.
The main run used to come through the main river here. They do come in through all these rivers that do come up to the Yukon. And it's one of the main rivers, this middle mouth area. This is what they call the north mouth. And this is what they call the south mouth. And we got fishermen all over these rivers. And a lot of them, most of the time, there's nobody in the river, so fish do come in.
Used to be really good one time, but now it's gone down. And when I was growing up, we used to fish 6-7 days a week. That was years ago. But now we have cut down to periods.
Most commercial fishers are residents of Alaska, and many also participate in the subsistence fishery. During years of good run strength, managers allow fisheries to harvest more, while during years of poor run strength, managers regulate fisheries to harvest less or none. Based on a system of abundance-based management, the number of salmon allocated to the fisheries depends upon the salmon run strength.
Late 80s then began to decline slowly. 90s, they were really down. Today, they're good. But hopefully they'll improve.
You take a salmon out of the river, the multipliers and benefits from that single salmon go way beyond whoever pulls it out of the water and processes it. The enjoyment of the resource, the feeding of families. When you sustain healthy families, you sustain healthy communities and healthy regions, and then government has less reason to intervene.
Gilbert Huntington is a commercial and subsistence fisherman from Galena.
My constituents are telling me that they don't need to hear, oops, there was a bunch of fish go by, and they're sitting on the beach and nothing in the smokehouse. So I think we really need to get a handle on what we're doing as far as management is concerned and our level of harvest, not only with the Canadian portion of the fish, but on the U.S. side. And I think hopefully gain some assurance as far as our ability to deliver the escapement objectives.
Been pretty quiet in this building for a long time.
Yeah.
And when you say fish processing plant, what would you process it?
Pretty much all the fish we caught, even the whitefish, filleted and smoked. And there hadn't been cleaned up. Everything would be scrubbed out. It would pretty much be full in there if we were busy, This is not a really good fishing area, so like I had a wheel, my brother had a wheel, my dad had a wheel, my mother had several nets. I mean, to do any good, we had to run all this gear. But we managed to fill it up a few times.
We caught 5 fish the other day, so we thought we'd catch a few fish to put up for you guys.
Martins like salmon.
And squirrels too.
Squirrels too, yeah. It's a Yukon fish. It's rich, a lot of fat in it. Caught on the north bank. These fish were caught on the south bank, kind of dry, hard, not so much oil. It's tannin river fish. Narrow, the way they're narrow, this is the whole fillet, you know, they're not trimmed or anything, and that's it's narrow. You get over here and you get them wider, thick, you get them thick Yukon fish. Those will be baked in the oven. They won't be dried like some of those are, they call gyaga, just half dried, 2-day smoked and baked. I like them cooked over the fire. And these are cut thick, you know, they're for canning. You know, where those are cut really thin and for dried for jerky type, yeah. If you guys want them, dive in. It's really sad that people aren't getting out to the camp, spending time in the camps anymore and bringing the kids out and having the kids maybe make a few bucks, but more importantly, learning how to work. Stuff like this is really important. Getting people up to par of understanding what's going on in the river, because we're all going to have to chip in and do our part to do what's right for the resource. And I think the Yukon panel can continue to push this process along, to grow that to where in the end maybe we might do the right thing.
Our kids will go away to school and go to college, but they'll come home because this is always home for them. In the river, the Yukon River will always call people back. As soon as summer comes, you have to come back. Just to even put your feet in the water. But I just wanted to make sure you guys saw this.
Yeah, this is great.
On a happy day. They used to talk about salmon as a king. As a king. Just this one salmon will be the leader of it all. He'll be the king. The others will be the salmon. Yeah. They used to tell stories of King Salmon, and they have when those cottons start flowing in the springtime, you see them flowing around, and they'll say, "Gosh, gosh, gosh, King Salmon is coming." And that's to show the people that get ready now, you know. Get your camps ready, get going. All summer we'd be up the camp. And that salmon, my grandmother took care of that salmon with gentle care. She really cleaned the fish, you know, before she even cut it. And she had to wait until how it felt before she cut it. And it was just perfect, just perfect fish. She lived to be 100.
The kings used to be really big. My sister went to boarding school when she was a little kid, and she came back and I told her to be a true Athabascan woman, she had to check the net herself. And she said, "What?" I said, "You have to check the net yourself." And so I drove her up and parked the boat, and she started pulling up the net, and I laid down in the back and I went to sleep. And she had this huge king. "Hey, you have to help me." My sister was telling me, "You have to help me." No, you could do it. "I can't pull it in." And I kind of sat up and I started giggling at her. I said, "Well, I said, just lean back with both feet and pull until you fall in the boat. I said, okay. She pulled it in the boat, and it was like 72 pounds. It was taller than both of us. And I said, you're a true Athabascan woman now. Could you help me? I said, you're almost finished. Now there's not that much fish, so we pretty much play. What little fish we could get, we just put in the smokehouse or put away in the freezer, and then we swim. And that way, if the kids could remember that, then they'll always come back. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, my name's Bill Flores, and I'm a Canada resident for about 30 years now. And I've been subsistence and commercial fishing here on the river ever since I arrived here. And at this time in my life, I'm fishing on this bank because I've got a test fish wheel project that the Alaska Department of Fish and Game uses as an index of Tanana River stocks. In other words, they get an idea based on previous year's data how many fish are going into the Tanana River. Relative abundance is what they call it.
There are 2 video fish wheels that operate on the Yukon River. One at Rampart Rapids is partially funded by the RNE Fund. This one, operated by Bill Flores, RNE has partially funded in the past.
The really interesting thing about this wheel is it uses a video camera to count the fish, to record the passage of the fish, rather than using a live box like this, which you would have to dip out. You'd have to hold the fish in there, come back after a period of time, and manually dip them out and count them. This wheel uses video technology, which allows the fish to go right back into the river within seconds after being counted. There we go. There's a chum. And so it's much friendlier to the fish. And it's a typical surveillance camera like you would use in a 7-Eleven store or something. And it's on all the time. And then we've got a couple of floodlights up here so that we can count at night. And when the fish goes through, they open this door. And there's a switch, a magnetic switch at the bottom, which signals to the computer to save video frames. It takes 5 frames before the door opens and 7 after the door opens. Okay, there's a king right there. It came through at 14 seconds after midnight. And there he goes through. Here's the next fish that came at 15:26. And there's a nice looking chum, female chum, going through, and there's a male chum going through. I'm not right 100% of the time, but it's close enough to give you a relative idea of what's going through.
No, I'm not eating anymore. Since we left that ocean shore, since we left that salty taste, letting ourselves go to waste. No time to work, no time to rest, witnessing your rotting flesh.
A joint technical committee was established to provide scientific and technical expertise to the Yukon River Panel. One of the current issues the JTC is researching is ichthyophonus.
Ichthyophonus is a protozoan parasite. It's known in rockfish and herring populations in saltwater. And the Chinook salmon pick it up as they're in the saltwater and then bring it into the river with them. And when they first enter the river, they don't show many signs of it because even though they're infected, the disease has not developed to the point where you can actually see it. You often see it first in the heart or the kidney, and then in advanced cases you can see it in the tissue, in the actual muscle tissue. And so if you go to a place like Tanana in the middle Yukon, as much as 30 to 40% of the fish may be actually infected.
It's sort of a sad deal. A lot of people don't know about it, but
it's not harmful to humans. It will not hurt you if you eat a fish that's infected. There is some decline in the flavor and the texture, and the fish don't dry very well when they're in their advanced stages. So it certainly is a problem, but not a problem to humans who may eat an infected fish. And one of the main questions that we have is, how does it affect the spawning? Do infected fish spawn successfully? If the fish don't spawn successfully, we may need to adjust escapement goals to increase them to allow an adequate number of fish to spawn.
So just the white, like, striation kind of thing, or the...
A definitive diagnosis of this parasite can only be done in a lab. Charlie Campbell and Ruth Altoff from Tanana use a fish wheel at the rapids, upriver from their fish camp.
It seems like the past years we're just sort of seeing a steady decline, just steady. And so what seems like, wow, that was a good day's fishing today, would have been, man, that stunk, 6-7 years ago. So, I mean, it's got me worried.
All Alaskan residents can qualify to engage in subsistence salmon fishing activities. However, federally qualified rural residents have priority on applicable waters if the resource is limited. Subsistence salmon fishing is either based from a home village or a fish camp, with gill nets and fish wheels being the primary gear types. Fish caught in this fishery may be used for customary and traditional uses such as transportation, which includes food for sled dogs. Everyone has a job to do when there are salmon and the wheel is turning.
Hey, Carl, could you and Si come over for a sec? That tote towards the stern there has whitefish and chums, and so you'll make the pot and then grab those.
Hey, Charlie?
Pardon?
Could you have somebody bring up some more fillets?
Yeah, will do. Yep.
It's fun. Most of the work is enjoyable, and some of it's not that fun. Most of it is.
Feed dogs, dog pot, little back burrs, maybe hang strips up there.
How many dogs you guys got?
29.
Charlie's dog pot is a mix of whitefish, chum, and fish scraps. Historically, dogs have been used for transportation and hauling purposes throughout the Yukon River drainage. Subsistence caught salmon, primarily chum salmon, is an important food for these dogs, but the demand is nothing like it was in the past, now that most people use snowmobiles.
Are those guys feeding now?
Yeah.
I have to sharpen my knife.
The longest standing fishery in Alaska is the subsistence fishery, which has priority over other fisheries in Alaska as identified in the agreement. Andy Basich, subsistence fisherman from Eagle, Alaska, the last village before entering the Yukon Territory.
This bluff up here, Eagle Bluff, is probably what Eagle is best known for. It's a real landmark here. It's kind of our logo of the town, Eagle Bluff. It's recognizable in any photo. There's not too many places left in the world where you can produce your own food, produce your own home, with very little outside interference. Is it always windy like this?
No.
Yeah, like they said, if we could cut off fish for a couple of years to let it build up. And, it sounds good, but you only got your kids so long. And if you don't start working them young and teaching them, and they get a certain age and they lose interest, wandering and stuff. But if you do it all the time, every year, it's just natural to them to, you get there with the fish, they work it and all that.
You guys probably never see a fish that red ever down there, do you? You do? That red? Probably ones that spawn fairly close then, huh? He's going over there. Got it right here.
When we first start fishing, we eat them, and then we get so sick of fish.
My favorite part is the teeth.
Really?
My favorite
I like
spot
the
is
soft
the eye.
part.
My favorite spot is the eye.
Me too. Or could you put the head in there? We could save it.
You could put it in the tub. I wash it again when I get home. If you miss a few years, you miss out a lot. And especially teenager kids, you know, they turn 17 pretty fast and leave home and start working, and they miss their 2 years of fishing and they never have it again. That's why I'm not for, you know, accepting money for not fishing or anything. There's no way. That's as political as I could get.
The Alaska-Yukon border isn't much to look at, but the number of salmon that cross here measures the success of the Yukon River Salmon Agreement.
Well, I think this is a peaceful border. It shows the spirit of cooperation.
There we go.
Hey.
Yeah, now we have to do the American one.
Under the agreement, the U.S. manages to ensure the agreed-upon spawning objectives and the midpoint of the Canadian guideline harvest ranges make it to the border. In the Yukon, near the border, a cooperatively run fish wheel, tagging operation and test fishery help determine the total number of salmon that have made it to Canada. So Canada can manage to ensure the agreed-upon spawning escapements make it to the spawning grounds.
This is a DFO dog?
Yeah. No, actually, that's not a good representation. No.
How many fish are you getting now?
I've been getting an average about 30 fish a day, which is incredibly low. But there's lots of fish going up, apparently. And this morning we had a little bump, 22 fish.
We mark the salmon. We put a little tag on them. The test fisheries to see, they'll do a catch on the river itself, and then they'll determine out of their catch how many tags are in that bunch, and then they do a population estimate from that data collected.
So the way it operates, they'll use commercial fishers to fish their regular nets in their regular fashion as if they were commercial fishing. The main purpose is to get tag return data, and all of the fish that's captured goes into the Trendikwichin fishery. Under the land claims agreement here, the Aboriginal food fishery is the #1 priority after conservation. So the test fishery is to provide DFO a real, current, timely window into the run strength, because it mimics the commercial fishery. They'll take those tag returns to get their best estimate of the run size in the river. And so the Department of Fisheries and Oceans doesn't want to open the commercial fishery or the domestic fishery, which is a very small personal use fishery, until they're absolutely certain that there are enough fish to meet the spawning escapement goal and the Aboriginal fish needs.
From the outside, it seems like it's nice that they have brought back the commercial fishers in to enable you to make some money and still participate in a fishery and combine it with the First Nation food fishery and with DFO. Like, it's a nice combination of including people.
At the end of the day, as long as we still manage responsibly on both sides of the border, and we put those fish back on the spawning grounds, even though there's way less than what we were expecting, they'll treat us fairly in terms of the returns.
The treaty requires the United States to contribute $1.2 million per year, of course those are United States dollars, into a restoration and enhancement fund. And it's mainly to, promote and sustain the salmon runs, but promoting and sustaining viable fisheries is another goal of the treaty. And Chris and Sylvain on their own have submitted applications and have received some money from the R&E fund to develop a fish plant up at the top end of Dozen Islands, about 10 miles up from here.
Last year we got 85 fish total.
We caught that in one afternoon here, this 5 days this week. It's hard to make a living.
Yeah. It's very greasy.
Very good.
Anybody else?
Most like Yukon, but not too oily.
Yeah, that was good, eh?
Yeah.
We just moved the whole thing.
This is smart wheels.
Yeah. That is a positive thing for the fishers here in Canada, to be sure, that not only can we use the fund to protect and enhance the salmon, but to protect and sustain our own fisheries.
Yeah, that's all going to town
And this is from the R&E fund?
Yeah, half of it, yeah.
Really what this amounts to is providing fishermen on both sides of the border benefits from those salmon. And the Canadians are catching less salmon than they would if all of those Canadian origin salmon were getting to the border. But with the assistance of the Restoration and Enhancement Fund, we can, to a certain extent, develop our fisheries. And also the main purpose is to protect the salmon, to do studies on the salmon so we understand exactly how they operate, where they go. There's radio telemetry so we know, where they're spawning, the numbers that they're spawning. And that's the main. If we can assure a plentiful supply of salmon, then hopefully we won't have to be fighting with our American comrades over who catches them. If there's lots for all of us. That's the final goal, I think.
The commercial fishery in the Yukon Territory occurs in the Dawson City area. The commercial fishery usually opens in early July, using fish wheels and gill nets to catch Chinook and fall chum salmon.
We share a dependence on the run. I guess what we've got to do is make certain that we understand how the whole run works, and that comes back to this project. It isn't just mature fish going up the river that's important. It's maintaining the productive capacity of the river. And we have to look at this as more than just fishing, but as stewarding the resource so that we have it all the time. And Jake knows the project completely, so I'll let Jake explain it to you.
It's a really fancy scoop that's sampling water that's going downstream.
And the water moves the screw and keeps it turning, and it also traps the fish, because once the fish is in the trap, the screw moves the fish towards the rear, and he comes out into the chamber here. Little weenie. See how tiny they are?
Okay, so what we're interested in with this project is when do the Chinook salmon out-migrate? When do they head towards the ocean? And what are the periods when they're moving?
There's a Chinook salmon there. The one with the par marks. This one right here. Okay, so that's a yearling. That's an Inconnu there. That's a lake whitefish. This is a larval sucker and a grayling. We hold them in aerated tanks, then we knock them out with anesthetic, just long enough to take measurements from them, weights and lengths. We put them in a recovery tank and then re-release them. One of the things we're going to do with this project is actually go and do some stream density work and to try to develop an index into freshwater productivity. So what that basically means is a window into what sort of productivity, in other words, how many fish result from the fish that get to spawn in each year.
What are the options that my grandkids are going to have? My grandkids can go and run a computer somewhere or run a bulldozer placer mining, but I'd like them to have the option to come out here and make their living from the river too. And I think the more we limit those options, the more we limit our own ability to survive. And I think we've got to think about that.
No, I'm not be able to do the boss. You chew all my net, just the robot. But that long stick out, I said, you can have that too.
Along the Pelly River, we visited 3 Yukon First Nation fish camps. The Aboriginal fishery is the longest standing fishery in the Yukon Territory.
Oh, 30 years ago, way different than now today. So you get about 60, 70 pounds salmon. Big, for longer than this. Oh, nice and pinky red. So now you dried up those fish there, so you want to curl it like stovepipe.
the one that ate all the salmon.
You're welcome to a fish camp.
Thank
You talk to other people.
You're welcome 2 hours.
Yeah. I was unsatisfied anyway what I catch and was very thankful for what we get. I guess, you know, everything changed nowadays and, you know, I feel bad.
Getting worse slowly as the years go by.
10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, I used to catch a whole bunch of them like that. Well, very few were catching. I just told you that. That's where you taste the salmon when you catch that kind of salmon. Yeah. You want to taste salmon, well, that's the kind you're looking for.
Why are they getting smaller?
Well, people. All those fish run there, you know, and people get in a big net and it's 8 inches mass and they catch all the big ones. The small one go through the net, what I catch there. Oh, that's...
The Aboriginal fishery is identified under the agreement as having priority over other Yukon fisheries, but unlike the subsistence fishery in Alaska, is only open to Yukon First Nations.
Past my neck. This is really the best fish net I have. I had this since 1980, I think.
Aboriginal fishers also utilize fish wheels, used mainly near Dawson City, and set gill nets as the primary gear types.
Yeah, they used to come early, but now it's just it run pretty fast, you know, like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, like that. So you gotta get them before they get too soft.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just everything's changing. Just like the way, yeah, look at the leaves today, it's turning white, everything. Yeah, you could see it all everywhere. See the other side? Used to be just dark green, but now it's changing.
Yeah, I think in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
Those leaves started changing color.
Yeah. It's affecting everything, I think. Yeah.
Family or families fish together for their food, social, and ceremonial needs.
Well, I just said thank you, Lord, for all the fish that you give to us that swim up the river. And then I say thank you for feeding the people with it. That's why you see on my calendar how much fish I get there. We don't keep it for ourselves. We give it to people that don't have nothing. I'm so happy to meet all of you here. God bless you all.
Amen.
Amen.
You're a good preacher.
Very good. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, the fish are starting to change, eh?
Yeah.
Now they're getting their big teeth.
We caught one with radio in it.
Oh, yeah?
What is it? Yellow tag. The fishery take it.
It's a little bottle like that with little transmitter machine or something inside. And on the tag it says the number and stuff.
The radio telemetry study is a cooperative study of many agencies. Many different projects, funded by the R&E Fund, work together to make the radio telemetry study successful.
We put the radio tag down the gullet of the Chinook salmon, and then we can track that fish. And it's a short-term study. It's not something that we want to do year after year after year, but it's provided incredibly good information on the numbers of fish and the distribution.
Now, cut the big one.
This program was developed by U.S. agencies. There's one program that was done on the Porcupine River, one on the lower Yukon in the Dawson area, and another major program which involved flying all these tributaries in this area here. So it's amazing information, and some of it's new. There are some new spawning locations. This program has given us a lot of new information, and we're very happy with the results.
Extreme power of a king salmon is unbeatable. Salmon, to me, a king salmon is the ultimate. The addiction is instantaneously after the first hookup, and you'll be a salmon junkie for life. Biggest thing with handling fish is hold it in the water, pointing upstream so the water flow is correct, going the right way through his mouth, out his gills. Get the camera ready, pick the fish up, take a quick picture, put it back in the water, and release it. Here's one of the best parts. The feeling you get as you watch that fish blow out of your hand. Now this fish here, a 28 pounder, and we kept this one. We were catch and release, and this one actually got hooked deep in the tongue and was bleeding quite bad, is why we kept this fish. Made my little sister very, very happy. I like to barbecue them, and I also can and smoke them. The brilliant colors are just fantastic of Yukon River fish. The biggest I've seen come out of the Yukon River is a 40 pounder. It was caught by my lovely wife, Lorelei Smith. These fish demand our respect. They have an incredible journey. They need to be treated as kings. They are kings. There is no part conservation. It's all or nothing. Either we're all on the same page or these fish aren't going to survive.
Presently, the recreational fishery is the only fishery open to all residents and non-residents of the Yukon.
Now this system's called bottom bouncing. You've cast out, you've got the weight on. As this bounces along bottom, the current will take and sweep your egg sac out and keep it in front of the fish as it's drifting downriver. And see it, they'll hit it.
Actually, they go up every river and creek in this area. We've done studies on it. Right to that far point there is maybe half the length of the lake. Yeah. You still have a long ways to go from here even. Yeah. This is at 2,000 and plus miles from the mouth of the rivers.
This is all the species that we have in our lake here. And this other sign here is a project that was funded by the Yukon River Panel. And the sign here is just to warn people off that they're crossing our tributaries where our salmon are spawning and rearing and everything. So you'll find them all along our traditional territory, up the Canal Road, north, south, everywhere.
Well, we got good things happening here right now. They do, we restore the creeks. There's a few creeks that we restore. We do lots of studies on those little fries and all that stuff. Got people working right now, removing beaver dams and things that stop the salmon from getting through this time of year, right? So we have them working, 3 or 4 guys, for a couple of months out of the year. So everything to boost her up, eh? Get everything coming back to life the way it used to be, they say.
You used to have to go help run the net, bring the fish, cut it, and the men used to hang, wash and hang. And we used to do all the cutting and things.
People from the Yukon River Delta were amazed to see Chinook so silver 2,000 miles upriver.
Yeah, like our fish almost.
Wow.
Color. Yeah, I don't know. Up in the lake. That's a good species.
They're probably one of the most genetically strong species, just because they come so far and come through so much by the time they get here. They say though, what's scary though, because we have the longest run and we're at the head of the Yukon River, is that if something happens to these fish, our fish are probably going to be the ones that are the first to go, because they have to go through so much by the time they get to us. So anything that happens to these fish, whether it's in the ocean or along the river or anywhere along the way, that could mean the end of our fishery. We don't ask for much. All we want is a couple thousand fish for our people, just to feed themselves. There's no commercial fishery, this is all people take these to eat.
We've always been taught that we're part of the land and a part of the water as the Tlingit people. And as stewards of this land, then it is our responsibility to sustain that food harvest that maintains the wellness of our people, especially the elders. And a part of doing that for us is to be part of the management and ensuring that at least 2 days of the week is shut down for our harvests, so that we're cooperating with the management to sustain that food harvest for future generations to come.
Even though Whitehorse is near the end of the Yukon River main stem, salmon stocks upriver of Whitehorse get special help. Thousands of juvenile Chinook salmon from the Whitehorse Fish Hatchery are released annually through the Fry Release Project, funded by the R&E Fund.
Well, they've all gone into the creek.
The Whitehorse Dam was built in 1958 to supply power to the Yukon. In 1959, the Whitehorse Rapids fish ladder was constructed, so Chinook salmon could get past the dam and return to several spawning streams upriver of Whitehorse. The Whitehorse Rapids Fish Hatchery began operation in 1984 to replace out-migrating Chinook fry killed by the turbines of the Whitehorse Dam.
Now, whether fish actually get killed going through the spillway, I'm not sure. I think they get disorientated and then they become easy prey for the seagulls. I know for sure through the turbines they don't make it.
Under the agreement, small-scale hatcheries like the Whitehorse Rapids Fish Hatchery are acceptable.
Now grab a male. You gotta be pretty sort of quick about it. Pour in the male.
But when it comes to the restoration of salmon stocks on the Yukon River, hatchery programs are no substitute for effective fishery management, restoration of wild stocks, and the preservation and protection of wild habitat.
And we'll just let them sit there for a minute and wash them, and then we'll put them to bed. Okay, now we're going to introduce them in and plant them. These are incubation trays. The way they work is they flow under and up and over so that they're mimicking underground springs that the salmon would normally spawn around in nature. So it's upflowing well, upflowing water all the time.
For the Chinook salmon, if you were to go into some of the reds we've seen today and you look for the eggs, quite often you'll have to look down 20 centimeters before you'll be able to find the first eggs. And the reason why they're able to do that is because of the enormous amount of energy that those big females have been able to invest to move enough gravel so they can get their eggs good and deep and safe.
Eggs were laid last fall in August, mid-August, towards late August, and then depending on the temperature of the stream, they hatch out in the winter, stay in the gravels, live on their yolk sacs. They button up, merge from the gravels, and the fish we see here are now feeding on an external food source, not their own yolk. They'll stay all this season, and although some may go out, but usually the wild fish here will overwinter next winter in this natal stream and then migrate out the following year.
Before release, hatchery fish are marked and tagged. The adipose fin is clipped, making them quickly recognizable even as adults.
You have to make sure that the tag is in exactly the same spot every time. The needle penetrates the nose, it pulls back, the wire is still in there, and when the wire withdraws, it deposits the tag into that area, into the little fatty tissue, right in the olfactory, right dead center of the nose and in, and it deposits it there at the same place every time. So when we do 25 or 20,000 a day, that's where it should put it in every single time. And on the coated wire, they actually have numbers on this tiny little tag.
Though relatively small in number, these hatchery fish help mitigate the effects of the Whitehorse Dam and add to what we know about Yukon River salmon migration. A few of these salmon have been caught out at sea.
It isn't the job, it's the salmon, and they're the priority as far as my concern is with them.
Should be lots of goodies in here.
Kwanlin Dun First Nation is conducting habitat assessment upriver of Whitehorse on salmon streams in their traditional watershed.
It's a stonefly, eh? So look at them here. See them? They're right here. So these right at these interfaces between the fast water and the slow water, where food seems to get deposited or come around the bend here, they can feed in that area, especially in debris piles such as this, where it flows into. They'll use that as cover and then feed inside there in the vortices and currents as things drop out of the current, because these drift a lot. This one's round, eh? So it could be a caddisfly without the, in fact, I think it's a caddisfly without the casing.
That's what it looks like, without its home. Right?
Without its casing. Some of them are without casings. Yeah. When you think of this, just this little area and all the life that's in it, you think this stream's like, it's not a ditch, it's a freaking organism.
Oh well. Gotta have respect.
Exactly.
Porcupine River drains most of northern Yukon. Chinook, Chum, and Coho migrate up the Porcupine River. Old Crow, the most northerly Yukon community, is at the heart of this region.
Chum. Dog salmon. Oh. We call it dog salmon in Old Crow.
The run looks poor. I'd probably agree with that, go to that 65,000, but I'd like to keep it up to that 80,000 if it looks pretty good yet. And that's all, I just want to put that on the table.
Thanks, Vicki. I think we all have to realize that escapement is critical. No matter where we're at in terms of the return of fish, we have to deal with some very specific things on the porcupine.
It is now November, and under the ice, coho are running at the mouth of Old Crow River. The temperature is only 20 below Celsius as Peter Josie checks the family net.
Lots of fish. That wasn't much work for 5 fish.
As fisher people along the river, we're just one harvester of this natural resource, and one would just hope that we'd have the common sense to slow down when the populations become dangerously low. But I'm afraid we won't learn fast enough what that sustainability is for the fish. And once they get to a certain low, then the natural predators from beyond our control is going to overtake them and wipe them out, and then we're going to sit here and go, oh well.
You know, what's really beginning to bother me is the idea that we're just not putting enough carcasses up there on those spawning grounds. There's not enough nutrient left behind, nitrogen-based stuff that those young fish can thrive on. That's what happens when you go after fisheries with a commercial fishery and start whittling those numbers down and constantly trying to exploit, you know, that surplus. And I think it's fighting against, you know, getting those runs back. You know, and Mother Nature's contributing her share with ichthyophonus and warm water conditions, El Niños and all of that. I don't think we're putting enough fish upstream. Right. You know, I'm a commercial fisherman, by the way.
I
but
want to have
really,
commercial fishing,
you know?
10 years from now. I want my kid to be able to do some commercial fishing.
Or at least subsistence fishing.
Right.
You know, subsistence fishing should be able to thrive.
Remember, you're not the last one on the river.
We need to understand each other's uses and respect them and come to the table to discuss the shared resource with a sense of respect.
From what I can see, we have all walks of life, and we have all groups potentially involved in the process. And if you're not, it's probably your own fault for not taking a more active role, because it's there for you.
Well, it's our last chance to find romance, the flounder in our spawning dance. I will treat you very fine, because there's one thing on my mind. I still see with one good eye, we have a chance to multiply. Has it ever dawned on you, I just wanna spawn with you?